The morning of my divorce hearing, my ex-husband walked into that courtroom like he was arriving at his own celebration. He sat down, leaned across the table, and said, quietly enough that only I could hear it, "You should have taken the first offer, sweetheart. You're walking out of here with the clothes on your back." His attorney smirked. The woman he'd been seeing for 8 months sat in the gallery behind him and crossed her legs like she was settling in for a show. I didn't respond. I didn't look at him. I reached into the bag at my feet and I pulled out a manila folder, not dramatic, not thick, just a plain folder, and I slid it across the table to my attorney and said 3 words: "When it's time." 40 minutes later, the judge put on his reading glasses, opened that folder, and read in silence for about 90 seconds. Then he set it down, looked at my ex-husband over the top of his glasses, and said, "Mr. Calloway, I have some questions about these numbers." My ex-husband's attorney stopped mid-sentence. The smirk left the room and didn't come back. "My name is Simone Treadwell. I'm 41 years old. And the most important thing I did in my 11-year marriage wasn't anything my husband ever thanked me for. It was keeping records. Stay with me. Because this story starts long before that courtroom. Let me tell you who I was before any of this. Because who I was is the whole reason the folder existed. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, the eldest of 4 kids. My mother was a bookkeeper for a small manufacturing company for 31 years. She kept ledgers the way some people keep diaries, carefully, consistently, because she believed that numbers told the truth when people wouldn't. She passed that to me like an inheritance I didn't fully appreciate until I needed it. I studied finance at UNC Charlotte. Graduated, went to work at a regional accounting firm, spent 6 years building a career I was genuinely good at and genuinely proud of. I was detail-oriented in a way that my colleagues sometimes joked about. I kept records of everything, receipts, statements, correspondence, not because I was paranoid, because my mother taught me that documentation is just honesty with a paper trail. I was 30 when I met Marcus Calloway. Marcus was 34, handsome in that easy, confident way, and he was building a commercial landscaping company from the ground up. He had 2 crews, a handful of contracts, and a vision for what the business could become that he talked about with the kind of conviction that made you believe it too. I believed it. We dated for 2 years. I watched him work hard, genuinely hard, early mornings, late nights, weekends. When he asked me to marry him on a Tuesday evening in my kitchen, no grand gesture, just him and a ring and a question, I said yes because I had watched him become someone worth saying yes to. We married in the spring of 2012, and for the first 3 years, I thought we had built something real. I was wrong about the ending. I wasn't wrong about the building. The early years were lean in the particular way that building something always is. Marcus had the vision and the work ethic. But a landscaping company needs equipment, trucks, insurance, licensing, payroll, and the gap between what's coming in and what needs to go out is brutal in those first few years, especially in the slow winter months when residential contracts dry up and commercial accounts pay late. I was still working full-time at the accounting firm when we married. My salary was steady, and Marcus's income was irregular. Good months followed by very thin ones. We made a decision together, or what I believed was a decision together, that my income would carry the household while he reinvested everything the business generated back into growing it. It seemed reasonable. It seemed like partnership. What it looked like in practice was this. Our mortgage came out of my account. Our health insurance, mine and Marcus's both, came from my employer benefits, a cost I tracked because I paid the premium differential each month. Groceries, utilities, car insurance, the property taxes on the house we bought together in 2013, all managed from my paycheck. When the business needed a new truck in 2014, we didn't have the cash. I had a 401k I'd been building since I was 24. I took an early withdrawal. The tax penalty alone was significant. I paid it without making Marcus feel guilty about it because I believed we were investing in our future. When his largest commercial contract came up for renewal in 2015 and the client wanted a performance bond Marcus couldn't afford, I co-signed the financing, my credit, my signature, my risk. When a drought that summer killed half his residential accounts, and he came home one evening and sat at the kitchen table and said he didn't know if he could make payroll for his 4 employees that week, I transferred money from my personal savings the next morning. No loan agreement, no interest, just a wife who believed in her husband's company. I kept records of all of it, not because I suspected anything, because I'm my mother's daughter and I believe in paper trails. I kept a simple spreadsheet, dates, amounts, purpose, account origin. I attached scanned copies of statements, transfer confirmations, co-signature documents. I filed everything in chronological order in a set of folders in the filing cabinet in our home office. Marcus knew I kept records. He thought it was a quirk. He'd sometimes see me scanning receipts at the kitchen table and say, "You and your files." He said it fondly, the way you acknowledge something harmless about a person you love. He did not understand in those years what he was actually saying. By 2016, the business had turned a corner. The commercial contracts stabilized. He added 2 more crews, he bought his own trucks, secured his own financing. The company started generating real revenue, and Marcus started generating a version of himself I hadn't met before. The version that came with success. Success changed Marcus, the way weather changes a coastline. Gradually, then all at once. The first sign was small. He started referring to the business in the singular. Not "we built this, I built this." Not our company, my company. It happened in conversations with other people first, at dinner parties, at networking events I attended as his wife, standing slightly to his left while he talked about his vision and his execution and his growth strategy. I told myself it was confidence. That's what we tell ourselves when we don't want to name the thing we're seeing. The distance came next, not dramatic, not sudden, incremental, the way all the important changes are. Business dinners I wasn't invited to. Weekends away for industry conferences that he went to alone when he'd always taken me before. A quality of presence at home that was physically there and mentally somewhere else. I raised it once, directly. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd told me he couldn't make payroll, and I'd fixed it. And I said, "Marcus, I feel like I'm disappearing from your life, and I don't know when it happened." He said I was being dramatic. He said it kindly, which was almost worse. I started paying attention the way you pay attention when you already know something is wrong but haven't yet found the words for it. The phone that was always face down now. The mileage on his truck that didn't match the destinations he mentioned. A receipt I found by accident in a jacket pocket for a restaurant 40 minutes from our house that I'd never been to, for 2. I didn't confront him. I had learned something from years in accounting. You don't make accusations on incomplete information. You gather, you verify. You wait until the picture is complete enough to be unmistakable. The picture became unmistakable in the fall of 2021. A credit card statement for a card I didn't know he had, for an account opened in his name only, forwarded to our address by mistake. I opened it because the envelope didn't identify the sender, and I didn't recognize it as personal. Hotels, florists, a jewelry store in uptown Charlotte, none of it for me. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, long enough for the coffee I'd poured to go cold. Then I did what I always do when I need to think clearly. I went to my filing cabinet. I did not tell Marcus what I'd found. I know people find that surprising, but I am, at my core, a woman who does not act on emotion when she can act on information, and the information I had was significant but incomplete. I needed to understand the full picture before I moved. I called a friend from my years at the accounting firm, a woman named Delia who had since gone into family law. I told her I thought my marriage was ending and I needed to understand my options. She recommended an attorney named Carol Watkins, known in Charlotte legal circles for being thorough in a way that opposing counsel found consistently uncomfortable. I met with Carol on a Wednesday afternoon. I brought a bag. The bag contained 2 years of personal financial records, the mortgage history, the 401k withdrawal documentation, the co-signature records, the payroll transfer confirmations, my employment records, and the credit card statement I'd found by accident. Carol opened the bag, looked at the first folder, and was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How long have you been keeping records like this?" "Since the beginning," I said. She looked up. Of the marriage? Of everything. She sat back in her chair. Simone, this is thorough. I told her my mother was a bookkeeper. She smiled. God bless her. Over the following weeks, Marcus and I continued living in the same house, in the particular cold peace of two people who have stopped saying the true things. He didn't know I had spoken to an attorney. He didn't know I had organized 11 years of financial documentation into a chronological record that told the complete story of who had built what and at whose expense. He thought my filing cabinet was a quirk. He filed for divorce in January 2022. His attorney sent a letter outlining their position. The business was Marcus's separate achievement, his vision, his leadership, his work. My contribution to the marriage had been as a supportive spouse, which was appreciated, but carried no legal weight in terms of business ownership or asset division. That was their opening position. I read it twice. Then I went to my filing cabinet. Marcus made one settlement offer before the hearing date. It was insultingly low, a number that presumed I knew nothing and would accept anything. Carol called me after she received it. What do you want to do? I want to go to the hearing, I said. You sure? He wants to tell a judge that he built everything alone, I said. I want to be in the room when he does that. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in March 2022. I arrived with Carol, a rolling document case, and the plain manila folder. Marcus arrived with his attorney, a senior partner at one of Charlotte's larger family law firms, the kind of representation that costs what it costs because the person paying it has enough to protect. He was dressed precisely, confident in the way of men who have decided the outcome in advance. The woman from the credit card statement sat in the gallery. She had come, apparently, to watch. Marcus leaned over before proceedings began and delivered his line, "The clothes on your back line." He said it quietly, with the smile of someone who believed it. I slid the folder to Carol and said what I said. The proceedings opened with Marcus's attorney's statement. It was polished and thorough. Marcus Calloway was a self-made businessman. He had built his company through talent and sacrifice. His wife had been a supportive spouse and would receive appropriate consideration for the marital home and a reasonable support arrangement. The business was his, had always been his, and the documentation would confirm this clearly. Marcus sat through this with the posture of a man hearing his own legend read aloud. Carol stood and said calmly that we would be responding to those statements with documentation already submitted as part of discovery and with one additional item she was providing to the court, the folder. The judge, a methodical man in his late 50s who had the energy of someone who had heard every version of every story and was interested only in what was verifiable, received the folder and opened it. The room went quiet. The folder contained 12 pages, not dramatic language, not emotional appeals. 12 pages of chronological documented fact. March 2013. Rachel transferred $14,000 from personal savings to joint account following business revenue shortfall. Bank statement attached. June 2014. Early 401k withdrawal of $22,000 net of penalty. Transfer to business operating account same date. Withdrawal confirmation and transfer receipt attached. November 2014. Co-signature on commercial vehicle financing. Original loan documents attached. August 2015. Personal savings transfer of $9,400 for employee payroll coverage. Wire confirmation attached. It continued for 11 years. The judge read slowly. He turned pages. He went back once to a section in the middle and reread it. He made a note. Then he looked up. Mr. Calloway, Marcus straightened. Yes, Your Honor. Your attorney has represented that the business was self-funded after its initial period. Can you speak to that? Yes, Your Honor. Once we got through the early years, these documents indicate a transfer in August 2015 from your wife's personal savings account to your business operating account. 4 years into the business, for payroll. Marcus's attorney leaned forward. Your Honor, transfers between spouses during a marriage are relevant to the question of contribution, the judge said, not harshly, just clearly. particularly when one party is asserting sole ownership of an asset and the other party has documentation of direct financial support of that asset over an extended period. He turned another page. There are also email records here. Carol had included them, emails from Marcus, dated, time-stamped, preserved. The judge read one aloud. "You are literally the reason this company survived this year. I don't know how to thank you for what you've carried for us. I promise this will mean something someday." He set the page down. "Mr. Calloway, did you write this?" Silence. "Mr. Calloway." "Yes." His voice had changed. The certainty had left it. "When you wrote that it would mean something someday, what did you intend that to mean?" His attorney put a hand on Marcus's arm. "Your Honor, we'd request a brief recess." "We'll take one in a moment," the judge said. He finished his note. Then he looked at both tables. "I'll be direct. The representation that this business was built without meaningful contribution from Mrs. Calloway is, based on these documents, not accurate. The court will be ordering a full forensic accounting review before any determination on asset division is made." He looked at Marcus's attorney. "Your client's team will have access to the same process. But I want to be clear. When documentation is this organized and this consistent, it tends to hold up under examination." He closed the folder. "We'll recess and reconvene." The gallery shifted. The woman who had come to watch slipped out of the room without making eye contact with anyone. Marcus sat at his table and did not look at me. For the first time all morning, he looked like a man who understood what he was sitting across from, not his wife. 11 years of records. The forensic accounting process took 6 weeks. I spent those 6 weeks working, running my life, sleeping a full night for the first time in longer than I could remember, because the thing I had been carrying quietly for years was no longer mine to carry alone. It was in the hands of people whose job was to find the truth, and the truth was exactly what I had always known it to be. The review confirmed everything the folder had shown and found additional elements the review team considered relevant. The full scope of my financial contribution to the business during its formative years was documented in their report with the detached precision of professionals who had no interest in either of our feelings about it. When we returned to court, Marcus's attorney had a different quality of energy. The confident senior partner had become a man managing a difficult situation. The judge summarized the findings and stated the court's determination. The asset division would reflect the verified record of contribution. The business would remain Marcus's. I had no interest in running a landscaping company and never had. But its value as a marital asset was significant, and my documented contribution to its survival and growth during the formative years was legally relevant to the settlement calculation. The number that came back was not extravagant. It was not revenge. It was accurate. There is a difference, and it matters. After the hearing, in the hallway outside the courtroom, Marcus found me before I reached the elevator. "Simone," I stopped. He looked like he hadn't slept well in 6 weeks, which I believed was probably true. "I knew you kept records," he said. "I just never thought about what that meant." I waited. "I told myself the story so many times," and he said. "The story where I built it, where I did it. It was easier than the real version." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry I made you go through all of this to be seen." I thought about that for a moment, about the 11 years, about the 401k penalty, and the payroll transfers, and the co-signature, and all the Tuesday mornings I had scanned receipts at the kitchen table while he made coffee and said, "You and your files." "Marcus," I said, "I didn't keep those records because I didn't trust you. I kept them because my mother taught me that documentation is just honesty with a paper trail." He nodded slowly. "I should have been honest without needing the paper trail," he said. That was the truest thing he'd said in years. I wished him well, not because everything was repaired. Nothing about what had happened was repaired, but because I was 41 years old and I had spent enough of my life organizing someone else's future, and I was not going to spend one more day carrying bitterness that belonged to the past. The settlement finalized 2 months later. I used part of it to open my own financial consulting practice, the thing I had quietly wanted for years and always found a reason to delay. I named it after the street my mother had worked on for 31 years, not for sentimentality, but because I wanted a name that meant something true. The first client I sat across from reminded me of Marcus in 2012. Young, building something, full of conviction, and short on systems. I spent 2 hours helping them build a financial tracking process that would serve them for years, regardless of how the business grew or how circumstances changed. When they asked why I recommended such thorough record keeping, I said what my mother used to say. Numbers tell the truth when people won't. My office has a filing cabinet. Same model I had at home, 4 drawers, steel, dependable. People who come in for the first time sometimes comment on how organized it looks. I always say the same thing. I learned from the best. Here is what I want to leave you with, and I'll say it plainly. I never wanted to sit in a courtroom. I never wanted a judge to have to read 11 years of my marriage in a manila folder to establish what I had contributed to another person's success. I wanted a partner who saw it clearly and acknowledged it honestly. That's not what I got. But here's what I know now that I didn't fully know then. Your quiet contributions have value whether or not the person standing next to you acknowledges them. The sacrifices you make in the service of someone else's dream are real, regardless of whether that person's story about themselves ever includes you. Document your life, not out of suspicion, not because you expect betrayal, but because you are worth the record, because what you give deserves to be known. Because the truth, when it needs to speak for itself, needs something to stand on. I walked into that courtroom with 11 years of paper. I walked out with something no settlement could have given me, the confirmation that I had always known who I was. The courtroom just made it official. Build your records the way my mother built hers. Carefully, consistently. With the quiet confidence of a woman who knows that the truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be accurate. Drop a comment and tell me, do you keep records of the important things in your life? I read every single one. Hit that like button, subscribe to Hidden Stories, and check the description for another story about the morning I almost walked away from what I'd built, and the one phone call that reminded me exactly what I was worth. I'll see you there. Take care of yourself, and keep your files.